You have a smaller brain than a human being who lived 20,000 years ago. Not a smaller brain than an average person today. A smaller brain than someone who never wrote a word, never counted past 10, never saw a wheel. This is not an insult. It is not a guess. It is measured directly from skulls across every continent where remains have been found. The human brain has been shrinking for thousands of years, and it has not stopped. The explanation for why is going to change how you think about what intelligence actually is. Here are the numbers. The average human brain during the last ice age was approximately 1,500 cubic centimeters. The average human brain today is approximately 1,350 cubic centimeters. That is a loss of roughly 150 cubic centimeters, about the size of a tennis ball. Gone. Not from one skeleton, not from one region. This pattern shows up consistently across skulls recovered in Europe, Asia, and Africa, spanning tens of thousands of individual remains. For a long time, scientists assumed this had to be a measurement error, or a strange artifact of which skeletons happened to survive. It was not. In 2021, a research team led by paleoanthropologist Jeremy De Silva at Dartmouth College ran something called a change point analysis on the entire hominin brain size record. Every reliable measurement of brain volume across millions of years of human evolution fed into a single statistical model designed to detect exactly when trends shift. Human brain size increased steadily for roughly 2 million years. Then, according to the model, somewhere around 3,000 years ago, that trend reversed sharply, recently, within the range of recorded human history. 3,000 years ago is not deep prehistory. 3,000 years ago, writing already existed. Cities already existed. This shrinkage was not happening to some distant ancestor species. It was happening to us. To people building the same civilizations whose ruins you can still visit today. So what happened? The first explanation is the one that makes people uncomfortable, and it is worth addressing directly because it is wrong. Smaller brain does not mean less intelligent. Brain size and intelligence are not the same measurement, and the evidence for this is sitting in plain sight. Neanderthals, on average, had larger brains than modern humans do. Elephants have brains roughly 3 times the size of yours. Sperm whales have the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived on Earth, and they are not building spacecraft. Size alone tells you almost nothing about what a brain can actually do. What matters is organization, density, wiring, efficiency. Which brings us to the theory that has gained the most traction in recent years. And it comes from a place nobody expected: ants. De Silva's team, in the same 2021 paper, pointed to something remarkable happening in social insect colonies. When certain ant species evolve toward larger, more complex colonies with specialized roles, something measurable happens to individual brain tissue. Specifically, a brain region called the mushroom body, responsible for learning and sensory processing, shrinks. Not in the colony as a whole, in each individual ant. The theory is that as a colony becomes more socially complex, individual members no longer need to carry the full cognitive load themselves. The knowledge, the memory, the problem-solving capacity gets distributed across the group. No single ant needs to know everything, because the colony as a system knows it collectively. Specialization allows individual investment in expensive brain tissue to go down, because the group is doing the thinking that used to require an individual to do it alone. Researchers now suspect something similar happened to humans, right around the same window that De Silva's analysis identified. Roughly 3,000 years ago, human societies were undergoing an explosion in complexity. Writing meant memory no longer had to live entirely inside a single skull. Specialized labor meant no single person needed to know how to hunt, build, heal, navigate, and negotiate. Legal systems, markets, and shared cultural knowledge meant individuals could rely on the group's accumulated intelligence instead of reconstructing every piece of it themselves. In other words, human intelligence did not shrink, it moved. It stopped living exclusively inside individual brains and started living in the space between people, in language, in writing, in shared institutions, in each other. There's a second theory running alongside this one, and it comes from an unlikely source: foxes. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev began an experiment breeding wild foxes for a single trait: tameness. Nothing else. just calmness around humans. Within a few generations, something strange started happening that nobody had selected for directly. The foxes developed floppy ears, curled tails, patchy coat coloring, and smaller brains, roughly 20% smaller than their wild ancestors. This cluster of traits is now called domestication syndrome, and it shows up whenever a species is selected for reduced aggression and increased social tolerance. Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that modern humans show many of the same physical markers as domesticated animals compared to earlier human populations: softer facial features, reduced brow ridges, and yes, smaller brains. His theory, sometimes called self-domestication, suggests that as human societies grew larger and more cooperative, individuals with high reactive aggression were increasingly punished, excluded, or eliminated by the group. Calmer, more socially tolerant humans survived and reproduced more successfully, and the same biological package that comes with domestication in foxes came along with it in us. Neither theory fully excludes the other. It is entirely possible that both were happening at once. Humans became more cooperative, more specialized, and more reliant on collective knowledge, all in the same historical window for the same underlying reason. Living well in a large, complex group requires a different kind of brain than surviving alone on a landscape full of predators. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting. This process did not stop 3,000 years ago. It may still be happening, and you are living through the most extreme version of it that has ever existed. In 2011, a Columbia University psychologist named Betsy Sparrow ran a study that became known somewhat informally as the Google effect. Her team found that when people expect to have future access to information, they are measurably worse at remembering that information itself. But they are significantly better at remembering where to find it. The knowledge does not disappear. It relocates out of the brain and into the tool. You have already outsourced your memory for phone numbers to your phone. You have outsourced your sense of direction to a map application. You have outsourced factual recall to a search engine that answers in under a second. None of this makes you less intelligent than someone without those tools. It means your intelligence, like the intelligence of your ancestors 3,000 years ago, has partially moved outside your skull. Think about what this means for the ant colony comparison. No individual ant needs a large brain because the colony thinks collectively. No individual human today needs to memorize the entire body of human knowledge because civilization thinks collectively, and increasingly, your phone thinks alongside you. Here is the uncomfortable version of that idea, and here is the reassuring version, and they are both true at the same time. The uncomfortable version. Your brain really is smaller than the brain of someone who lived 20,000 years ago, and the trend shows no sign of reversing. If anything, the tools driving it keep getting more powerful. The reassuring version. This was never a story about humans getting dumber. It is a story about intelligence changing shape. A hunter-gatherer 20,000 years ago had to store an entire survival library inside one skull. Every plant, every animal behavior, every seasonal pattern, every relationship in the group, with no external backup of any kind. You do not have to do that. You were born into a species that had already begun handing pieces of that burden off to language, then to writing, then to institutions, and now to devices that fit in your pocket. Your brain is not failing to keep up with your ancestors. Your brain was built by the exact same evolutionary pressures that made outsourcing worthwhile in the first place. Smaller was not a downgrade. Smaller was the receipt for a trade that had already been made. Somewhere, a skull, 20,000 years old, sits in a museum drawer, slightly larger than yours, belonging to someone who could never have imagined writing, could never have imagined a library, could never have imagined a device that remembers everything, so a brain does not have to do. That skull was not smarter than you. It was simply alone in a way that you will never have to be.